It is the 16th of August, 2008. I am Rob Campbell, and I am sitting here with Jon Leigh. We are at the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, and we're here to talk about the T28. Thank you for coming, Jon.
Well, it's been a while to get here, but we've got it now.
Okay. Could you start just by, we know you're Jon Leigh, but could you introduce yourself, tell us who you are, your background, and how you sort of came to the T28 project?
Oh, you can make me think already. Yeah, Jon Leigh, lived in Rapid City since 1970. Came from Southern California. Wanted to get away from the commotion and smog and everything else. I had been going to school in Los Angeles, and after I finished that, there was a chance to go to Vietnam as a civilian. I did that. I sat through the Tet Offensive and thought this isn't the place for me. Don't have a chance to shoot back. So I got out of there and came back, and after a couple weeks got married to my wife, who I knew from high school, and she was just finishing college out at Claremont. And so she had a job teaching in Pomona, and I had a pretty good job at El Monte, and then went back out to Brackett, which is a little further east from Los Angeles. And while I was there, a friend of mine who I went to school with, his dad was a senior pilot for TWA in out of Los Angeles. And he knew all his cronies from the airlines who all had toys. They all had their own airplane. There was a couple airports that these people collected at. And there was one out at Cable Airport that was a pretty good group. So we went out there, and while we were there, I looked in a hangar, and the T28 was there. Not knowing what it was, and I worked on them when I was in the Navy, but not knowing why this was in this hangar they were just forming the 90 thousandths aluminum that was bent over the leading edges of everything. So we had to go over and look and see what this funny looking thing was and what they were doing to it. Well, there wasn't anybody around. So we continued with our day and talking to all the old aviation people. And after 2 years in Southern California, the smog was just too much and too many people. So we said, we're getting out of here. Went to Phoenix, and that was the same thing there. So we turned right around, came back to Los Angeles. My wife's sister lived in Rapid City, and she wondered if we'd bought a house in Phoenix. So we said no, and she said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, do you have any space there that we can stay in for a few days? I had never been here before. We packed up everything. She didn't sign her contract for the following year, and I turned in my resignation, and we just came back here cold. Didn't have any idea what we were stepping into. She ended up with a job at Douglas in the school district, and I worked out at Lean Airport, which doesn't exist anymore. And then somebody said, well, there's a airplane out at Rapid City Regional, you should go see. So I went out there, and it was the T28 that I had seen in Southern California. And then I found out what it was for. So they were looking for a mechanic, and they hired a guy that was in World War II, and he drove the first or the second pilot, I guess, crazy. They didn't get along at all. And the electronics technician, it was just a battle. So they hired me the following year. So the second year, I've been with the T28 since then. But it's kind of an odd type airplane because it's been modified so much from the original A model. And the Navy, I guess, was quite helpful and did a lot of the work before it actually came here. I guess they kind of resurrected it a little bit. And then it went back to Pensacola for some tail modifications. There was, on the horizontal stabilizer, they did some work on that. But it's kind of sad to see it gone now.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fun, and a lot of people enjoyed seeing it and hearing it. That was the biggest thing. But
What's your wife's name?
Candace.
Candace Leigh.
Yep.
She was not from Rapid City.
No, she.
Her
grew up-
sister just happened to be,
Her-
her sister moved here.
Yeah, her husband, my sister-in-law's husband, was in the Air Force.
This has nothing to do with the T28. Did she
Yeah.
teach out at Douglas for a long time?
My wife, no, she was out there for three years before
Oh, I see.
she came into Rapid City.
Because my wife's parents both taught out at Douglas, the Crutches. But that's a different story.
What? Crutch?
Crutch, George Crutch and Patricia Crutch.
My wife knows her.
Oh yeah?
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, they've got a daughter that was about the same age, I think, as my oldest son.
Erica Crutch, that's my wife.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
lovely girl.
yeah. Yeah, Pat and Candace, I think, taught.
What's your son's name?
John.
I'll just write this down and tell my wife about it. This is much more important than history. So if I could have you back up just a little bit,
Okay.
how did you first get involved with airplanes or being a mechanic or anything like that?
Oh, gee, when I went in the Navy in 1962, they said they were greedy for people who would sign up for more that wasn't drafted. And if you wanted to go to their schools, they would grab you in, and they did tell me the truth. I was one of the few people, I guess, that actually got what they wanted.
Oh, so you wanted to be a mechanic,
Yeah,
fix
yeah.
airplanes,
Yeah.
and you got to fix airplanes.
Yeah.
And they trained you. You knew nothing about it before then.
No.
Did you work on cars and things like
Yes,
that?
yes,
Yeah.
lots of cars.
So you just knew you liked mechanical things and you
Yeah.
thought it'd be cool to do planes.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been through 4 different aviation schools in the Navy, and I didn't want to be anywhere near jets. And
Just because,
well, it actually turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened. The reciprocating engine was dying. Everything was going to jets.
a reciprocating engine is with cylinders like in a
Cylinders.
car,
Yeah.
driving a propeller. Yeah.
And they didn't have anything that would land on aircraft carriers that had a reciprocating engine, round engine and a prop. Everything was going to jets. So I never was on a ship. I was in the Navy for 4 years and 4 months, thanks to McNamara, and was never on a ship. Never been on the water except for survival school
Uh-huh.
in the Navy.
What years were that then? That was
62 to 66.
And what did McNamara do?
4-month extension.
Oh, he gave you the 4 months.
Yeah.
You have him to thank for the 4 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those running around these days, huh?
Yeah. And I was 2 years in Japan, then came back for the last 2 years in Monterey, California, at postgraduate school in Monterey.
So what kind of planes did you work on in the Navy?
While I was in Japan, it was on B-26s. And when I was in Monterey, it was T28s and Beechcraft D18, a small twin engine photo version of that. So it was all reciprocating engines. And they only had one jet there.
So you were
T-33.
very familiar with T28s.
Yeah.
Can you give me some kind of idea of what kind of role the T28 played in the Navy, how common they were, what they were used for, or just sort of?
It was a trainer, and it happened to, that was one of the first ones. That was an A model. It was from the Air Force. And it was a trainer, and it only had an 850 horsepower engine on it, which was very underpowered. But it was right at the transition time going to jets in the evolution of aircraft. But it was a basic trainer that they used, and the early ones with that small engine had about the same flight characteristics as the jets of the time. They were very underpowered.
Oh, I see.
And then the Navy used them for trainers. They were still a basic trainer, but they went to the B model, which had a larger engine and was a little stronger airplane and a little bit heavier. Let's see, Vietnam had them for ground support fighters, and there were all sorts of gun pods that would bolt to the bottoms of the wings, and they could use it for ground support. It wasn't a dog fighting aircraft or whatever you'd consider in-air fighting. It was just kind of a ground support, and they had a bunch of them. There's still a lot of, I don't know now, this year is 20 years ago when where I'm thinking, but there were a lot of small countries that had them as their military airplanes.
Bought them from the U.S.
Yeah, they were.
Who did you say was switching to the T-28Bs?
The Navy, that was
The Navy ones.
Yeah, and the Air Force did away with them completely when the T-33 jet came in. I guess that was one of the first jets that.
Oh, I see. So they would have probably sold, the Air Force would have sold them all off?
Yeah, and I don't think they were junking them that early.
Yeah.
But they did all go down to, Navy ones went to Davis Monthan, where they dismantled them.
So that's why you were working on them in the U.S. is because they were trainers.
Yeah.
You were at a place where lots of guys were being trained to be Navy pilots.
Yeah.
Monterey, is that what you said?
Monterey was the postgraduate school, and they were all pilots by then when they were there. There was proficiency flight training for them, and they'd come over and they had to fly so many hours a month to keep their proficiency up.
And so what kind of T-28s were you working on while you were in the Navy? A's, B's?
They were the B's.
The B's,
yeah.
Okay.
And they had a C model, which was a carrier version that was used for flight schools and landing on carriers, that they actually did land on carriers with them.
And at this time while you were in the Navy, did you have any, this is a funny question, but did you have any particular impression or opinion of T-28s, or I mean, what kind of a plane was this from a mechanic's point of view?
They were a stable airplane. There was never really a lot that went wrong with them. You know, there was never a real weak point that carried on from one to the other to the other. That it was just a normal maintenance type thing that we worked on.
They weren't junk, they weren't stars, they were just
good, solid
generic Navy trainer
collection of parts that stayed together.
Hey, this is another funny question but I've been wondering about, and maybe you know something about this with your background in the Navy. I've been wondering, if possible, how I could track the history of this particular T-28. Is there like some sort of magic serial number or license number or something that would? I was just wondering, just out of curiosity, or maybe you heard where this plane was serving, what it was doing, where it was. It's a 49.
1949.
We know that for sure.
The serial number is 49, which would designated the year. 1516. That was the production and serial number of the airplane.
49-15-16.
1516, no dash.
1516. So what does the 1516 mean?
That's just the number that fell in the production. Then there'd be 15, 17, 18.
Oh, so this is the 1,516th T-28 they made in 49, supposedly?
No, the first numbers, I don't know what they designate. It's probably, I think it's the 13th or 14th one. Sometime, if you can, just take and Google 49, 15, 16.
Really?
And maybe T28 or something like that to separate it out a little more. I've found a lot of information on the internet, and then, well, there used to be a set of books around too that had all the Air Force numbers but all the military airplanes. I found a site that has the B-26 I used to work on while I was in Japan.
The particular B-26,
yes, the same
not
model.
that model, but that individual one plane.
Yeah.
Wow, so do you think it's possible that we might be able to find out where this plane was?
While it was in the military, there should be some.
They keep those kind of records?
Yeah, I don't know who has done it.
That's interesting. Well, I may call you about that someday.
Yeah, I'll look and see if I can find. But Navy 77214, if you put that in, it'll come up with the airplane, and it shows. I think there's all but one of the airplanes we had when I was in Japan. In the squadron, there's a little blurb, and it has a picture of each of them.
Wow. Of each individual plane?
Yeah.
Not just the model, but the plane?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you can read it right on the side. You can expand the picture enough that you can read the numbers on them.
So where is the serial number? Is it engraved in the engine?
It's got a little plate on there's a rollover truss inside where the data plate is.
Inside?
Yeah.
Huh. That's well, I may call you about that sometime. It just seems to me that this particular machine has had such a fascinating history. I mean, it's now however old, and it's gone through all these lives, and now it's where, in Ohio or something?
Nebraska, I think it is.
We'll get to that later. Sorry, I'm jumping around. But I may really call you about that, because I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah, this thing it belonged to Mark Hurd Photography at one time. That's where the original side number came from, that 510MH.
I'm sorry, what's 510MH?
510MH was the side number, was the FAA.
Painted on the side of the plane.
Yeah.
And that came from where?
Mark Hurd Aerial Photography.
Do you know how to spell that?
MARK.
Yep.
HERD, I believe.
Aerial photography. Can you tell me what you know about that?
Not as much as some guy that came wandering into the airport out there one time and looked at that thing, and he said, well, I won't tell you what he called the thing.
You can tell me for history.
He said, I rode that son of a bitch into LA dead stick. He'd lost all power, and he got it down into some little airport in around Los Angeles someplace.
This particular T28?
Yeah.
Really?
And it had been down in South America doing aerial photography down there.
Oh.
And I guess that was quite a challenge to get it out of the country and get it in South America countries, where that's where they use the things as fighters and ground support. And being an ex-military airplane, I guess they get kind of hesitant about letting things like that in, but this was long, long ago.
So Mark Hurd was flying around in South America taking pictures with it?
Yeah.
Could you tell then from looking at a plane, did it have like a camera bay in the base or something?
I think they must have had a different belly door on it that goes in, because this, when we had it, or had it, it didn't have any type of holes in the door or anything. But those things are a dime a dozen. They could put a new one on. And
This plane has a door on the very bottom.
yeah. It's
All
access.
T28s do. To access what?
There's a nitrogen bottle and oxygen in the battery, and it's like a little cargo area.
Oh, I see.
And
kind of like the hood of a car.
yeah. And then we had all the recording system down in that bay.
Oh. See, I've never seen that bay. I thought all the stuff, I crawled into the, what do you call behind the cockpit?
Yeah, the rear cockpit.
The rear cockpit, and there's all kinds of junk in there.
Yeah.
But there's more hidden underneath the floor,
yeah.
you're saying?
Yeah. It's a bigger area than that back cockpit.
Oh, it's larger than the back cockpit?
Yeah.
So most of the equipment was hidden under the floor?
There was a lot down in there.
In the belly?
Yeah.
I had no idea. Do you know anything else about the history of this plane before you got to it in Rapid City? Well, you saw it being worked on.
Yeah. And let's see, what else was there out there? No, we really didn't talk to anybody out there to hear any of the history of how it ended up there, but that was McCready, the guy with the Gossamer man-powered stuff. I guess he was one of the engineers on that. That seemed kind of strange to me, where he was designing that huge heavy thing and then went to saran wrap and balsa wood.
You never had to, or you never did interface, talk with those folks who had armored it and outfitted it?
No.
Because that was all done by the time you got on the
Yeah.
scene. Did you have to deal with, and then it was reworked down in Pensacola, you had mentioned.
Mhm.
A couple of times, right?
Yeah.
Because one time Wayne Sand was telling me they did quite an overhaul
Yeah, that's when they put
after
the
his first year, or during
Yeah.
his first year.
Yeah, they put the heavier gear and beefed up the wing spar and made it so it was the same as a B model.
Right. And then did it go back to Pensacola after that another time?
Yeah, I went back. They were back in the history of the airplane. I don't know how there was probably 9 airplanes or something that got into some strange maneuver, and the horizontal stabilizer had folded up on them. And it was an old service bulletin, and they thought, well, if we could, they found a couple surfaces that had been modified, and they would put those on for us, and they took the armor plate off the old ones and put it on the ones that had been modified. And
So it was like the equivalent of a recall.
yeah,
A lot
yeah.
of T28s were getting this, did you say the horizontal stabilizer?
Yeah, in the back.
Modified so it'd be more
Yeah,
safe.
yeah.
It had to do with the I read about this. It was the G-forces
Yeah.
or the vibration or something.
It was some weird configuration that they were, I don't know if they were pulling out of a dive or going in or just what it was, but it was just a service bulletin that the Navy and the Air Force put out. I don't think the Air Force did any of theirs. I think the Navy had started the program of changing. But
So you came to Rapid City in 1970.
yeah.
You, who'd you work for? What was your job? Did you start working on the T-28 right away?
Oh, no. I worked for a couple little fixed base operators for a couple of years before I started.
Does that mean out at the airport?
Yeah, over at Lean Airport.
Oh, that's
Lean
right.
Field.
You told me that.
Yeah, that was a short, semi-paved runway. It was kind of rough, but it was for just small aircraft.
Sure. So, and then you went out to the airport. You said, oh, I've seen this plane before. And how did you come into this job with the T-28? How exactly did that happen? Do you remember?
I just chased down Wayne Sand when he was here and asked him what they were. Well, Gary Johnson was the one that. There's a long collection of characters. Gary Johnson went to school with Mike Pendo, whose wife taught school with my wife. So the rumor mill got going that they were looking for an aircraft mechanic. Well, voila. So then I traced back all through the chain of people and came across Wayne Sand, and he was the one that thought, well, it's about time to get another mechanic. And
I see. When did you then start working on the T-28?
ooh, it must have been the fall of '72, I believe.
So Wayne switched mechanics to you.
Yep.
Now was that during, I'm trying to remember the chronology myself, was that during that first season with all the trouble? Was that 72?
It was
Or-
72 was their first, I think the first season they operated out of Cheyenne.
So they
So
had,
it was a regular plan type season that they had down there.
they had already had one real season.
I think so.
When you
but,
came,
yeah.
it was already a going concern. And so Wayne had been the pilot for a year or two already.
Yeah.
Okay. And so who all did you work with?
Rudy Floor was the electronics technician. Gary Johnson was the electronics engineer. Well, yeah, he was electronics engineer. Chuck Jasper, 1 year, he went back to school, I believe, the year they came back from Cheyenne. He was kind of finished with it, and he was electronics technician at the time there too, and did a lot of the initial hanging of all the wire in that thing. I think there's about 7 or 10 or who knows how many miles of wire are in it now. But he was one of the original ones that generated the stuff, that the bundles of everything they took down to Pensacola for the Navy to install in it. And then Who else did we have? Then there were graduate students through the years. Each year they'd have a graduate student that was kind of, he's a meteorology student that would go for the summer and do odd jobs of whatever they were interested in. And a lot of them were working on their papers and whatever. And how many other people did we have? There were a lot of people from NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research.
Working on the plane.
They had equipment on there, that they
Yeah.
took care of.
Yeah.
And so there was, during the summer, each summer there was a minimum of probably about 5 or 6 people that were actually involved with the T28.
Now, were you an employee of South Dakota School of Mines?
Yeah,
You were a state employee,
yes,
full-time,
full-time,
all year round.
all year.
Was this your full-time job to take care of this one plane?
Yeah,
That was your job?
yeah, for 24 years.
24 years, 72 till 96?
Yeah,
Is that right? Did you retire in 96?
yes. It was time.
Who took the job after you then?
Charlie Summers was the pilot in the last years, and he was also a mechanic. He's got about every FAA license that there's available for parachute rigging and flying balloons, hot air balloons, and maintaining balloons, and just anything you can imagine that's in the air. He's got certification to work on. So
He could take that engine apart, put it back together again.
well, he wasn't too interested in that.
Oh.
He was more interested in flying, but
Sure.
he could. Yeah,
He could if he had to.
Yeah.
You could have taken that engine apart, put it back together.
yeah.
Or you did take it apart, put it back together again.
It was had it rebuilt in Minneapolis,
Sure.
but it was putting it back on, putting all the accessories on, and getting it back on. And
But your responsibility was everything on that plane, or everything except the instruments, or what was your responsibility? I mean, because you talk about all these people.
airframe and the engine.
Okay.
Everything involved with either.
But you didn't do the electronics of this sensor hooking up to the computer or anything like that?
No, they had the
That's what-
technician, but worked with him. And,
Sure.
And
So what kind of shape was this plane in? Do you remember when you started working on it in
it
72?
was actually in very good condition because the Navy had just gone through the thing completely and did all the modifications and everything to it. And really, they're a fairly trouble-free airplane. The engine, in the conditions that it was operating, was kind of sensitive because of the rapid cooling and all the metal contracting real fast when it gets so wet and cold. And you have to be kind of careful with that. And then low manifold pressure is one of the hardest things on it. If you're coming down from high altitude, you couldn't change altitude real fast because the propeller would cause the engine to spin, and with the carburetor closed, the vacuum increases in the intake system. And this goes on and on and on. There's a supercharger, internal supercharger, that's 2-speed, has a seal, and with the decrease in manifold pressure, vacuum actually, it will suck that seal out, and then oil goes in, and it just consumes oil like there's no tomorrow.
So to a guy who doesn't know anything about planes or engines, the manifold pressure is the exhaust?
No, intake.
Oh, the intake.
Intake manifold pressure, yeah.
So it's supposed to have a negative pressure, isn't it? To suck air in for the engine to burn.
Until the supercharger starts spinning fast enough that it actually pressurizes it.
Oh, then it's pushing air out.
It's pushing it out into the
It starts
cylinders.
running backwards. So the air intakes could start running backward, is what you're saying.
No. It's sucking more air in and pressurizing the system from the supercharger in through pipes into the cylinder.
Oh, I see.
Fuel and air comes in to the supercharger. It's pressurized, It goes out to the cylinders.
Sure.
And it will go up to 52 inches of manifold pressure. Used to be able to tell you how many pounds that was. Not anymore. But no, it's for increasing of horsepower. It increases the power of the. But on a normally aspirated engine, it's always negative pressure.
So you're saying that pressure would drop too low and it would start sucking oil out of the cylinders?
Out of the crankshaft area in the
Okay.
back by where the supercharger is.
And so the pilot had to watch for this, you said?
Yes,
When the
yes.
pilot was,
If you close the throttle too fast, which you would normally think is slowing you down, which it does. But then as the aircraft descends, the wind blowing on the propeller spins it. Well, it's like going
Oh,
downhill,
I see.
and the wheels are holding the engine is holding the car back if you're in a car, and you're
Kind of like engine braking.
yeah,
And that could be a problem.
yeah.
And if the pilot didn't, so they had to come down gradually enough so that they weren't doing that.
Take a long time because you'd build up too much speed if you're going too fast, and you're limited by speed again.
So if Wayne went into some crazy steep dive coming down at the airport, what would happen to the engine?
It would probably suck out one of the seals in the supercharger.
And then?
Oil consumption. Then you have to have it overhauled. Then,
Oh, because then you have oil all over the place and it's,
well, it just burns it. You can't keep oil in it
yeah.
because when you're below atmospheric pressure in a vacuum, it's sucking air all over the place. So it's going to try and suck that air, and all it's doing is drawing oil. It'll draw oil in through that seal.
And then you'd.
So that was the weakest point of that engine, I think.
He never did that?
No, we had.
Now this would not affect, if he's up in a cloud and he's having huge turbulence and it's blowing him up and down, that has nothing to do with that.
No.
It's just the speed of that propeller.
Yeah.
I see. And that's only because it has this supercharger.
Yeah.
Do all T28s have this supercharger?
B models and Cs, yeah.
Okay, that's not part of the special modifications for
Oh,
going
no,
into
no,
thunderstorms.
no.
So all T28, this is an issue with all of this kind of T28s.
Yeah.
I see, not just this particular one.
All radial engines that have.
I see. So the plane was in good shape.
Oh, yeah.
So what did you spent 2,000 hours a year working on this plane?
Well,
40 hours a week.
Well, I was here 40 hours a week. There were times that you got that 40 hours a week in a couple days. It was more of a deal if something needed to be done while we were gone on a project. You just stayed until it was done. And
but you worked on it all winter. This was your job all winter in Rapid City.
yeah, and we built a lot of our own equipment. There, some of the instrumentation and stuff.
I see.
That all the metal work, I did most of that.
That would take up a lot of your winter building mounts
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
special things. I see.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my question. What you would also be when they went to say Colorado, you were always there.
Yes.
And what were those? What was what would you call that? Field camp, field project?
Field projects, yeah.
When you were out in the field project, can you just take me through a typical day out in the field as you remember it? What did you do there? Where were you?
We were at Cheyenne Airport when we were in Cheyenne.
Was it Cheyenne or Laramie?
Well, we were both.
Oh, different
Yeah.
summers. I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had their weather briefing in the mornings, and everybody that was really working on the airplane didn't go to those. That was mostly scientific crew that went to those, and then you'd sit and wait for rest of the day. You sit and wait for a thunderstorm.
Right.
If they were forecasting something for late in the afternoon, you had a couple hours to do minor projects if there needed to be anything done, or you just sat and waited.
So I have no idea what it's like to be an airplane mechanic. Do they have daily maintenance?
No, there's only scheduled maintenance of once a year, an inspection of the whole airplane.
And that's something you do?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's.
And that's the
every-
thorough
everything,
top to bottom, every
front to back, top to bottom.
everything. How long does an inspection like that take?
For one person doing that, it used to take me better part of a week to get through everything, to remove all the panels and everything, and get through.
And this is a preset list of things that you must check off and
Yeah.
sign and say, yeah, this is for the FAA.
Yep, that goes into the logbook. There's something too. If there's some way, if you want to know the history of that airplane, there were a set of logbooks that went back to the days when it first came out of the Air Force. And they have, well, there's an engine and an airframe. And then I think in the engine log, no, in the airframe log, it has all the flights that the airplane did. And that goes back to the days of Mark Hurd in the aerial photography, when it was, this was, you know, way back in the early days. But I don't know what has happened to those, if they went with the airplane or IAS had kept those. They really, you know, it's nice that they, if they do go with the airplane, if you buy an airplane or something, it's nice if you get the log. You really, I guess, only need the current logbook, but there's so much information in the previous ones because it's all inspection when things were done. They should actually go with the airplane, but
These
a
are
lot of
official
times they're
legal.
lost.
These are official legal logbooks.
Yeah.
You're required to keep these by
Yeah.
the FAA.
Yeah.
Have them on hand if they come to inspect
Yeah.
or something like that. This is not an informal notebook like mine.
No,
Okay.
no. You have a number. You have a number. It's got to be there.
And the mechanic keeps this logbook?
No, it belongs to the airplane.
But I mean,
But he's the
is this the pilot's responsibility or the mechanic's
No, it's
responsibility?
the mechanic's responsibility to enter the.
Pilot doesn't fill out the logbook.
No, he can put in the flights and everything if he wants. But
I should.
well, I guess most private airplanes they do keep track, but I guess they just to keep a current time of pilot time and
Sure.
and
It logs all
where
the
it's
flights
been.
and the time
Yeah.
of the flight. And
Yeah.
the planes have an odometer. They have an hour meter.
hour meter.
And that would go in the logbook and
Yeah,
when you
time-
change the
time and
oil
date,
and
yeah.
when you do anything. I will look for those logbooks. Where did you stay when you were in these field projects? Where'd you sleep at night?
Usually it were halfway decent motels. The one in Cheyenne it's still there. And it was a little seedy then, but it was reasonable for what we were getting for per diem.
I see.
But
you
no,
ever-
we stayed in some halfway decent places. And
Did you ever stay in houses or anything like
No,
that?
no.
Motels?
yeah, motels most of the time.
Pretty much cheapy state rate motels.
Well, yeah, you could make a little bit on it. You didn't spend that much time there, so you really weren't that interested in other than
No pool.
some of them had pools.
Oh, they did, huh?
The Ranger in Cheyenne doesn't have a pool.
The Ranger is where you remember staying?
Yeah, yeah.
I'll go check out the Ranger. So is this a lot of work out in the field, or were you there just to do the maintenance and in case something went wrong, or?
Yeah, there really wasn't a whole lot that went wrong during the summer. I think one summer in Florida, one of the blades, two of the blades on the propeller started to erode on the leading edge, so we had to chase down another propeller. Had one up in Rapid City, so I came up and got that and drove it down and put it on, and I guess that was 3 days or something. We were back in operation. And I think that's the longest we went that we possibly could have missed a flight for research.
Wayne was telling me a story. Oh, he said his, I'm going to get this wrong, the sump light came on. A light came on indicating that there was metal in the oil.
Yeah, that happened before I was here.
Oh, that was before your time?
Yeah, and that turned out, as I understand, it was a problem with the oil tank that caused that.
And a piece of metal came loose and started floating around the engine?
The thing is designed for inverted flights. You can fly it upside down. So in the oil tank, there's a pipe that tips. As the airplane rolls over, it tips around and is still
So
drawing
it's still
oil.
drawing oil. Ah.
And it draws it in and runs through the engine, through the pump.
This is what we call an aerobatic airplane,
Yeah.
because it can do spins and rolls
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
which,
But-
which you wouldn't want to pull with a whole lot of planes.
No, not unless
Yeah.
they're kind of designed, the engine designed for it. But evidently it had gotten stuck in the position for inverted flight. And it was, the engine wasn't getting oil and it really didn't even have to be upside down. It would, I imagine, kind of swing like a pendulum. It was like a pendulum.
So that could have been a real problem.
Yeah, until they found out what was causing it.
So Wayne was not being oversensitive about safety in that case?
Oh, no.
You think that was wise to check that out?
Oh, yeah, it would have, well, the engine was done. When you get some light and metal in the engine, that's time for an engine change.
Oh, I see.
So he landed on, I guess, 79, I think it was, down here.
You were talking about this incident in Florida with the propeller. You lost a few days of field time for mechanical reasons. That was not a common experience.
No.
That was about the biggest.
I think that was, well, other than the season we lost due to a mishap on the runway in Oklahoma. We were out of commission for a year. But as far as missing flights for mechanical things, I think that was one of the very few times and otherwise I don't think it was more than a flight or so that we may have missed, but I don't remember very many at all.
So you did 24 years, you did almost 24 summers of field projects then?
Yeah, I think we were here 2 or 3 summers out of that time.
Home and not
Yeah.
on a project. So how long did these field projects go for?
Originally, they were 3 months,
Huh?
and that was quite a chunk on the good time of the year. I was never here, and it worked out well for the family because Candace would bundle up the kids and she'd bring them. She came down to Florida and Oklahoma and different places, and they got to see a lot of the country that way.
They came for the whole time?
No, just for
They
a
came
couple
for
weeks.
a couple weeks in the middle for their vacation.
Yeah.
Go see Dad and go
Yeah.
see Florida.
Yeah.
Did you? I'm just curious about these. Did you go to Switzerland?
Yes,
Oh,
2 years. 2 years.
I'll ask you about Switzerland in a minute.
Okay.
But just on your typical summer field project, did you have days off where you could go drive around and see the sights and I don't know?
Originally, we had weekends off, which was nice. When we were in Cheyenne, we'd, come screaming back up to Rapid City, and that was in the days of the 55-mile speed limit, so it took you a little more than it does now. But
Visit the family.
when we did the three-month seasons, we usually had the weekends off, and they admitted that they were going to lose some flights that way, research flights, but it wasn't too bad to be able to get away for a couple days. And when we went back on Monday, we'd leave Rapid real early in the morning, and we'd be down there by noon, and the storms never really progressed to any point to where they could be doing any flying till after that, so we didn't lose anything by that.
Well, I was always curious about these storms. I understand, they're afternoon kind of thunderstorms. How late, how early in the day might these flights be?
Most of them were all in the afternoon, early evening, long before dark.
Couldn't fly this thing at dark. Was it legal to fly
It's
this plane at dark?
just safety. Pardon me?
If you were just taking an ordinary flight in this plane, it'd be perfectly fine to fly it at night.
Oh, yeah.
But you don't want to be flying around thunderstorms at
Yeah,
night.
no.
So they didn't even worry about those 11 p.m. storms.
No.
I see.
No, if it was dark, you'd be having dinner.
Did you enjoy field? Did you look forward to field projects, or did you just think, oh, geez, I've got to be out of town for 3 months? Or was this the good part of the year, the bad part of the year? Did you suffer through it, or did you enjoy it?
Well, I kind of enjoyed it the first month or so to get away from Rapid City and everything, but then it got kind of long. But no, it was enjoyable, and you always learn something. There was always something you'd pick up from the people from NCAR and different organizations you worked with. It was kind of interesting to see what their equipment was that they were working on and their ideas for research that they were doing.
Were these was this an intense experience out in the field, or was it pretty routine and quiet and boring, or was
No, it was routine, but I wouldn't say it was boring.
Uh-huh.
But there was enough variety of things going on that you weren't sleeping anywhere during the day. And
Sure. It was not a tense situation?
no, there's a few flights, I guess, that were kind of eye openers, and you kind of listened to the radio to see that it was still roaring along. And
You would typically be listening in on the radio on the speaker while they were flying?
sometimes we could if we had a radio in the shop that would receive the frequencies of the aircraft.
Folks from School of Mines and folks from NCAR and folks from whatever university got along, worked together well?
Yeah,
Who was your boss? Who did you report to?
Paul Smith.
Paul Smith.
Yep.
Since way back, he was the, I guess, project director.
Yeah.
From your first day? He was your project
Dr.
director?
Schleusner was in charge of the institute when I came.
Mhm.
And then when he went to be acting president for the school, Arnett Dennis was in charge of IAS. And then Paul Smith took over after.
Was the head of IAS?
Yeah,
So he was your boss as the head of IAS?
Yeah.
Not just for the T28?
yeah,
But you reported pretty directly to him?
yeah.
He was your supervisor?
Yeah, he was the only, the only one that could put up with me. So.
Well, for 24 years.
Yeah, he was good to work for. He never questioned anything I said that needed to be done, or, well, why does it? And if it was why, it was just out of curiosity. It was not questioning your judgment or anything else, which made the 24 years a lot more bearable and enjoyable to work through.
You didn't feel that you were dealing with crazy bureaucracy all the time?
No.
You were dealing with the real problems, not the
Yeah.
bureaucratic problems?
Yeah.
Did you?
And they made me feel that way. You know, that's your bailiwick out there. You take care of
They said
that.
you take
and
care of that.
What
It's-
you say is good for us.
Make sure the plane runs and runs
Yep.
safely.
Yeah.
How did it compare to working on planes in the Navy in that regard, or just in general?
Well, it's about the same. You didn't have to deal with the public. Oh, man. When I was working in private aviation, that was... Most of the people that had airplanes could afford the airplane, but they couldn't afford the maintenance. It was just on a borderline there.
I see.
And a majority didn't want to have anything done that needed to be done. They'd
So
bite
you-
the bullet and have the annual inspection done, but you didn't want to find too much wrong with the airplane, or they'd just be crying the blues.
So, but when you were working on the T28, you got to do what they call the work,
Yep.
not the nonsense and the paperwork
Right.
and the forms and
Well, the paperwork, I had
arguing
to-
with your boss.
had to
and-
do all the paperwork
Sure.
and everything. And-
Sure.
And they made it nice to have the confidence in me that as whatever need to be done, do it.
How about purchasing? Was that was fine? How did you, something breaks on the
Just a
plane?
request, fill out a request, part number, and who to get it from, and if there was something that needed to have 2 or 3 different deals on a bid or something, just turn them in, and that was.
The parts you got were fine?
Yeah.
You didn't have to go to lowest bidder and get some funky Guatemalan, nothing wrong with Guatemala, but you know.
Yeah.
Joe.
It's like the rest of the system. If you find somebody that deals you good parts, there's a way to get them from them.
And of course, the reason I ask is because Wayne Sand was telling me about his travails early, his first year basically.
Yeah,
Low bid engine.
yeah,
That was not the case
Yeah,
when
no,
you were
no,
around.
no.
You got to get proper parts.
Yeah.
Proper equipment,
Yeah.
proper everything.
and I think they learned quite a bit from that first fiasco when Wayne was here, that it didn't pay, so they generated a way that if there was a reliable source, and it may not be the very cheapest, but it was reasonable, it was fair,
Sure.
and they dealt with the same people just about all the time I was there.
I'm not sure what this question is, but can we talk for just a minute about safety? Obviously, this is an unusual aircraft.
Uh-huh.
So what was the sort of attitude or philosophy about safety?
If there's anything questionable that needs to be repaired or whatever, well, it might work now. Why don't you go fly? No. It was fix it to the best that it can possibly be. And that was their attitude. It was not, the scientific research doesn't take precedence over safety. That was the primary.
So there was
thing.
not that tension,
No,
for example, in the
no,
field.
no.
They say, "Come on, guys, you're going to keep us," no, well, come on, we need to.
No,
They just did it.
there wasn't any of that. I don't remember that ever from anybody with any of the different organizations we were in, car or anybody else that, well, come on, let's go just this one time. No, there wasn't.
I'm guessing you worked very closely with pilots.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the pilots you worked with? Who were they, first of all? And maybe we'll just talk about them one by one. Well, Wayne was the first pilot.
Well,
Correct?
Bud Youngren was here. He was the very first. That was long before me.
Mm-hmm. Do you know how to spell his last name, by the way?
Youngren.
Okay, thank you. So, did you know Bud?
I knew him, but not as the pilot. He was
the
kind
former
of-
pilot already.
Yeah, airport bum type.
Is Bud still alive?
No,
I understand.
he went to work for National Weather Service, and then he was a state meteorologist or something for a while here, and then he got in with the Weather Service. But no, he had an accident in his house. He fell down a stair well into his basement, and he had physical problems or whatever. I don't know if he had brittle bones or something, and he died from broken neck, I believe.
Oh.
But no, he's no longer alive. And then,
And he was before Wayne. So Bud Youngren was the pilot for just a year or two?
I don't even think it was a whole year. It was while they were just getting the airplane going,
Test runs.
operating,
and things
yeah.
like
And they had a lot of engine problems. I think that goes back to that inverted flight thing in the oil tank. They lost another engine too.
that. Oh, you think that may have been the same problem?
Yeah, I think. I don't remember now. It's been so long.
Sure.
But,
So you worked with Wayne, obviously, for quite a long time, right?
Yeah.
For a while.
Yeah.
What was Wayne like as a pilot? I mean, what is the interaction between the pilot and mechanic?
I believe what he says is a problem. He believes what I say has fixed it.
But he didn't monkey around with fixing things.
No,
You didn't
no.
monkey around with telling him how to
No.
fly the plane.
No.
Okay.
And they were all like that. We really had a pretty good group of pilots that if they said there was a problem, there usually was. There was very seldom that there wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And when it said it was fixed, it worked. And
So I imagine, I have no idea, I imagine the pilot and the mechanic would talk every day, "Hey, how's the plane running? It's running fine. I hear this funny rattle," or I don't know.
yeah, our schedule was a little different than the scientific people. We were just basically involved in flight, and they had all their instrumentation and electronic stuff to tend, which took more time than what we had to do. And it was, we probably put in about an hour for every 2 hours that they actually spend at the bench doing things.
Sure.
We were there, and if anything needed to be done, clean the airplane or whatever, that we keep everything ready to go.
And then after Wayne,
Joe Killinger, he was another Navy. Wayne was a Navy pilot. Joe Killinger was a Navy pilot.
Joe's not living, is he?
No, he was working for Frontier Airlines at the time and filling out papers before flying from, I don't know, someplace out of Denver, going someplace, and had an aneurysm and just dropped right at the counter in the little room they have for pilots to do the paperwork. And so he's no longer with us.
So tell me about Joe.
Uh,
What do you remember about Joe? How long did he fly the plane?
Probably 3-4 years. And he was from Hot Springs, so he was a local kid. Wayne Sand was from Montana.
Mm-hmm.
And after Joe Killinger, there was John Prodan, and he was Air Force pilot.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one that had the mishap in Oklahoma, in Norman, Oklahoma.
This is Colonel Zoom.
Colonel Zoom.
How did he get that name?
I don't know. He was always zooming about. The car was another extension of his body. And,
Zooming it about at a good rate of speed.
and your eyes were as big as manhole covers, or they were closed tight if you were riding with him. And so somehow somebody thought, well, he kind of zooms around. We ought to call him Colonel Zoom.
He was a colorful figure.
Oh yeah, he'd keep you entertained for quite a bit.
What was his background? Was he a military?
Yeah,
Did
he
you
was
just tell me?
he was Air Force.
Oh, that's right. He's
pilot,
a-
yeah.
And he did a couple seasons? He was around for a while?
Two or three, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that deal in Oklahoma, his wife was in for surgery that day, and I think if I would have been, nobody knew about it, I don't think. But he was concerned about that.
You think he was?
I think it would have been best if he just said, hey, today's a bad day for me.
Yeah.
Let me call and see how my wife is doing or whatever.
You think he was distracted, preoccupied?
I kind of think that must have been it, because he was a better pilot than that. It's just that he landed too far down a
Yeah,
runway.
what did happen exactly? I know he drove off the runway.
Yeah, he landed
On
too far
landing.
down. Yeah, and it was not a smooth runway, so there were, big puddles. They were fairly deep,
Mm-hmm.
and that thing, when you do apply brakes, all the weight goes forward and comes off the main gear where the brakes are, and that's how you steer it, is with the brakes. But if it's hydroplaning across a puddle, you aren't really slowing down. And he just tried to make a 90-degree turn,
Oh.
and he was going too fast, and it went off the edge of the runway.
Oh, this is at the end of the runway. He
Yeah.
had to turn left to come
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
Turn around and make a
Yeah.
U-turn, basically.
Yeah, well, there was a couple 90-degree turns
Right.
to the taxiway.
Sure. But this is something you have to do because it's at the end of the runway
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
And he just hadn't braked enough
Yeah.
before he had
Yeah,
turned.
well, there wasn't enough space to, he landed too far down the runway.
So it went over like
Maybe
a
if he-
tricycle, kind of forward
Yeah.
onto its side.
Yeah, well, the nose wheel is only 2.5 inches wide, 3 inches wide, and in that mud down there, it just sank in and broke the landing gear on the nose off. And he was trying to apply power and pull it through. Well, those big blades of that propeller landing in that mud, it just pulled so hard on that it broke the nose case of the engine off, and the propeller went flopping down the...
Oh, so it's not, so the plane didn't go over,
No, it didn't completely tip over or anything.
but there was too much, you said there was too much stress on the propeller and so it broke something?
Yeah, it
It's not that the propeller hit the ground.
hit the
Oh.
ground and sunk into the mud, and turning as fast with as much power on it.
Oh,
It was trying to pull forward
in the
still.
mud?
Yeah,
Oh, so it did tip over, the propeller was in the mud?
yeah. The nose
Broke.
gear broke off. The front of the airplane settled down, and allowing the propeller to get into the dirt and the mud. And it's like a boat propeller. You know how boat propulsion works. It's off the
Sure.
propeller. Well, it was working the same way in the mud.
So what broke first? I'm still,
The nose case of the engine.
what's the nose case?
Magnesium front
Like the
of the
hood?
engine. No, it's the front of the case of the engine. The reduction gear.
Oh, inside?
Yeah. There's a great big.
Because the propeller was in the mud?
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And then it broke off.
yeah, it just popped.
So he
it
did
right
tip
off.
over at the end of the runway?
It settled. It didn't completely go upside
Right,
down.
it,
It just nose
It
dropped
came
down.
off the wheels?
No, it was still on the main gear.
Oh, because it sunk down?
Yeah.
Oh, it was that soft and wet?
Oh, yeah.
But the
it was
front
a
wheels
wet
just
gear.
sunk down into the mud and?
Yeah.
Oh, I
And
see.
as it went into the mud, the forward momentum of the airplane and everything broke the nose gear off.
So it wasn't the fact that he tried to turn too fast and rolled over?
No.
Like a three-wheeler or
No,
something?
no.
Oh, I see. He just went off the end of the runway.
Yeah, probably another 3 or 4 feet to the right of where he was. He would have stayed on the taxiway and it may not have sunk.
Because he was turning right?
Yeah.
I see. But this was not a case, you're saying, of a pilot being a hot shot and...
No. I think it was just stress that.
I see.
But that involved quite a process to get parts for that. That was a trip to Davis Moffin that went down there and.
One second.